Okay, welcome everybody to another class on advanced phrasal verbs. I like doing phrasal verbs quite often with students because I think it's very important vocabulary and very advanced vocabulary which perhaps the books don't often go through in enough detail. Also, I'm going through phrasal verbs with a few students at the moment, and so this is good revision. It's good revision for them, and it's good revision for me as well, because I need to keep going through these phrasal verbs in order to learn them by heart. So, these are chapters 11 to 20 from the Advanced Phrasal Verbs book. Hi to the Ukraine. The Advanced Phrasal Verbs book is Cambridge University Press. I'm afraid I can't remember the authors at the moment. I think Odell is one of them, but please just put in Advanced Phrasal Verbs Cambridge. I'm sure you'll find the same one that I'm referring to. And if you're not sure, ask under the video. Perhaps I'll put the details in the description. So, in chapters 11 and 12, we had loads of phrasal verbs. We had knock someone down to a certain amount, and this would be a certain amount of price in pounds, and this is when you manage to haggle with someone and you manage to negotiate a lower price. Haggle, by the way, is a good word for negotiate, especially in a market kind of place. When he says £15, you say £12, he says £14, and then you agree at £13. That means you have knocked him down to £13. You have knocked him from 15 down to £13. Hello to Russia. So if you pin someone down, this could have two meanings. This could literally mean hello to Japan. This could literally mean that you hold someone down, and so if you study martial arts, you might pin someone down with a particular hold so that you can hold them down and hold them in place. That's one meaning. But secondly, you can use this to mean manage to elucidate somebody's meaning. Hi to Spain. And what I mean is, you might say something like this: the journalist wanted to pin him down concerning his policies on taxes, or something like that. If you want to pin someone down on their policies, it means you want to work out exactly what they mean, exactly what their position is concerning this particular policy. And so when you pin someone down, you fully elucidate their position or on a certain topic. If you get or bring someone down, you make them feel depressed. So I hope that you don't bring anybody down, but I'm sure that some people get you down, depress you, make you sad. And put someone down is related, because when you put someone down, it could mean that you insult them. If you put someone down, it could mean that you say bad things about them and you make them feel depressed. You get them down because you're putting them down with insults. So this can mean insult someone, but it can also mean if you put an animal down, it does mean to kill an animal. Usually because the animal is sick, that's when you put an animal down. When the animal is so sick they can't get better, and so you might say the vet had to put the dog down. The dog was too sick after the accident. Okay, if you put someone down for, this means the idea is that you've made a list and you put someone down on the list for something. And so you might use this in a restaurant. If you're sitting in a large table, you and your friends, perhaps 10 of you, have all decided to go to the restaurant together. And your friend might say to you, I'm having steak, what are you having? And you might say, put me down for spaghetti bolognese. And it basically means I'm going to have spaghetti bolognese. But you mean that put me down on the list for. It doesn't have to be in a restaurant, of course, it could be anywhere. But when you say put me down for, it sounds like you're saying, my choice is going to be this. Put me down on the list for this. Okay, if anyone's unsure there, please ask questions below. If you put something down to, this is when you ascribe a cause to something, when you're talking about the cause of an effect or result around you. So it's very similar to come or boil down to, but it's when you are actively ascribing a cause. So you might say global warming comes down to, I think this was the example I used last time, Perhaps I'll use a different one. The violence in the capital comes down to a lack of police officers, you might say. Or you might say, I put the violence in the capital down to a lack of police officers. So I hope you can see that they're always about causes, and you're going to see another one about causes. Can't remember where it is. There it is. There are two more which are very similar. Stem from and be rooted in. Because I could say the violence in the capital is rooted in a lack of police officers, or the violence in the capital stems from a lack of police officers. Okay. If something goes down well, it means that it's successful. If your daughter's ballet performance goes down well, it means that all the audience gave a massive applause, a standing ovation maybe. So they clapped a lot and it went down well. And if an event goes down in history, that means it's going to continue in our memories for a long time because it's an event of great historical importance. So you could use this to say, I think he will go down in history as the greatest rap singer ever, and it means that his name will be immortalized. He will become famous for a very long period of time. He will go down in history as, if you're going to say the position that he'll go down in history, he'll go down in history as a great singer. Okay, if you're in the restaurant again and you all decide to go in on the bill, that means you're going to share the bill. You're all going to chip in. And that's why I've put these two together, because they're similar, though slightly different. You go in on a pizza, or you all chip in £5 on a £20 pizza. If there's 4 of you, yeah, you all chip in £5. So they're slightly different, but you can all chip in. You can all go in on the meal. Okay, if you pitch in, this is similar to chip in, because when you chip in £5 you share the cost, but when you pitch in you share the work. And so perhaps the kitchen is in a right mess and all the family members decide to pitch in and help, and so you all do different jobs in the kitchen. You all pitch in, and it means that you tidy it up much quicker. Okay, usher in is when a new period is ushered in, a new moment in time is ushered in, and this is used for periods or eras, and it's when a certain event ushers in a new period. So you might say the invention of the telephone by Alexander Bell ushered in a new age of telecommunications, something like that. When a new age is ushered in, a new age is a new era is ushered in, it means a new period of time begins. Okay, if you bring in a new law, you introduce a new law, and I put these together because I think they're a little bit similar, but bring in works with laws and legislations. You bring in a law, or you bring in a new piece of legislation, but usher in means introduce a new period of time, and so I think they're quite similar. They're both kind of introduce. If you show someone in, you go to the door. If you show someone in, you go to the door and you open the door and you let them in and you say, hi, this is my house, and you're showing them in. It's, you know, when you walk around and show them inside your house. Let someone in is basically open the door and allow them to come in. So both of these I think are pretty similar. If somebody cuts in with a comment about the camera, like the person just did, it could be very off-putting, and it means that they interrupt in some kind of way. They interrupt your flow. So usually people cut in the conversation. Usually people butt in the conversation, and it means interrupt the conversation. Chime in also means interrupt, but for me it's not as negative as cut in or butt in, which means rudely interrupt, or in some kind of way stop your flow, or disturb you, distract you, put you off in some kind of way. Chime in for me just sounds like interject. It sounds like somebody has just said something and then you chime in. So it's not quite the same as interrupt. I think it's more when you suddenly say something, maybe unexpectedly, but where just as somebody is finishing. I don't think it's quite as rude as cutting in or butting in. Chiming in is more when you join in, but just after someone has said something. And if somebody barges in, that means that they just enter into the room without knocking, and perhaps, you know, it's your private office, or it sounds like you're in a place which is private and somebody just barges in when they shouldn't do. And then when I wrote barge in, I suddenly thought of all of these other ones which I did write down in a previous lesson. Cash in on, home in on, close in on, walk in on, listen in on, let someone in on, be in on. Now, if you cash in on a good deal, you profit from a good deal. If you home in on or close in on someone, that means you're chasing them, probably in a car or maybe on a bicycle or a motorbike, and you're getting closer and closer and closer, and you're homing in on your target. You're closing in on your target. You're getting closer and closer and closer, and you have almost caught them up. Catch up is what happens when you eventually reach them. You catch up. So yeah, very useful ones there. Walk in on is when you barge in on, and you can say barge in on as well. It's another one. When you walk in on someone, you interrupt what they're doing, and you don't knock on the door, and you just completely interrupt what they're up to. So usually when you walk in on someone, they're doing something clandestine. They're perhaps they're two people who are lovers, and you walk in on them and they're kissing. Or you could walk in on the accountant when they're shredding a load of evidence about where the stolen money has gone in the company, or something like that. That's when you walk in on someone. If you listen in on someone's conversation, you're eavesdropping. You're actively trying to hear their private conversation. So again, you're listening in on something clandestine. If you are in on the plan, that means you're in on the secret plan, the clandestine plan. And if you let someone in on the plan, it means you let someone in on the secret. So you let them in on your clandestine activities. So they're often involving something clandestine. If somebody's chasing you, if somebody's homing in on you or closing in on you, behind you, somebody's trying to catch you on a motorbike, then you might try and shake them off. You might try and shake them off by going left down the road and then right down the road, and then take another right or go round the roundabout, and you're trying to shake them off. So if the police are chasing you and you're a criminal, you might want to shake them off, otherwise you might get sent down. Send down is when you get sent to prison. You don't want to get sent down. Okay. If somebody cuts off your electricity, if the electricity company cuts off your electricity, you don't have any electricity. If they cut off your gas, you don't have any gas. So if you don't pay your bills, they might cut off your gas, your electricity, your water. I don't think they can cut off your water, but I'm not sure. I would pay your bills if I were you. Cordon off is what the police do when they create a barrier called a cordon, and they cordon off part of the street because maybe there's been a crime there and they want to keep the evidence all preserved. And so they cordon off the scene of the crime so that they can bring in the forensic scientists and work out who the killer is, who the murderer is. Now, if somebody backs off, it literally just means that, yeah? And so if somebody threatens you, you might back off. Or you might tell somebody else to back off if they're threatening your friend, and you're standing up for your friend. It's another good phrase verb, stand up for someone. If you're standing up to the bully, if you're standing up for your friend, you might tell that person to back off. If you shrug something off, this is really similar to brush someone off, and I wanted to make a comparison between the two, because when you shrug something off, it means you treat something as less important than it really is. You pretend that it doesn't matter. And when you brush someone off, you pretend that their comment or their point doesn't matter, that it's not important in some kind of way. So brush someone off and shrug something off. That's the main difference between the two. We usually say brush someone off with people and shrug something off with things. But both of them mean, shrug means do this, like, you know, with your shoulders, you shrug your shoulders. So if you shrug something off, you mean you're acting like it's not important to you, just shrugging, doesn't bother me. And so, yeah, you might shrug off the latest bill that you've had for £1,500, you might just shrug it off and say, ah, it doesn't matter, I'll pay it later. But you might brush off someone who comes to your door. You might fob them off with a poor excuse, or you might just brush them off and say, sorry, I'm busy today, see you later, and close the door. That's usually what I do. If you say that the lesson kicks off at 7:30, it just means starts. The meeting kicks off at 10 o'clock. If you show off, it means that you're trying to show how much better you are, or cooler you are, or in some kind of way, something positive about yourself, and you're trying to show everybody how great it is. Normally you show off your possessions. You might show off your new car, you might show off your new motorbike, but it doesn't have to be. You might say that somebody was showing off if they were showing their skills in some kind of way. I would like to say that I recently did a couple of Russian lessons, and it wasn't that I was showing off. I hope nobody thought I was showing off. It wasn't for that reason I did them. I really did them because I want people to correct my mistakes and I want to improve. And I do have to use this language quite often, and so I would rather use it without making so many mistakes. Okay, if you give someone a ticking off, it's the same as tell someone off. Tell someone off. Tell someone off means reprimand or reproach. It means give someone a warning for bad behaviour. Yeah, reprimand, reproach. Reprimand and reproach sound very, very formal to me, but tell someone off or give someone a ticking off is much less formal. Okay, if you round off the lesson with a quiz, it means you finish off the lesson with a quiz. Hi to Kazakhstan, hi to India. Round off just means finish off. Round up means collect people together, by the way. When you round up a group of people, you collect people together. Maybe you round up 6 people to play in your 5-side football team. But round off means finish off. You round off the lesson with something. You wrap up the lesson with something. Very similar to these two. Wrap up the lesson, wind up the lesson, round off the lesson, finish off the lesson. If you keep going on about phrasal verbs like me, it means you just can't stop talking about phrasal verbs. And if you keep on at someone about something, and that's really useful to remember that, you keep on at someone about something, it just means you keep talking at that person about that one topic, okay? The same with go on about, go on at someone about, be on at someone about, bang on at someone about, rabbit on at someone about. They all mean the same thing. You can do this with other verbs as well. Ramble on about, harp on about, waffle on about. There's loads and loads of verbs here which work in this phrasal verb fashion, so it's very worth remembering this one. Very worth it. It really is. Now, if you dwell on something, it means you're obsessed with this one thing. Your mind is fixed on it. So usually you dwell on bad experiences and it's quite negative. I suppose you could dwell on something neutral or maybe even positive, but usually you dwell on painful past experiences, and it's not healthy, it's not a good thing, it's quite negative. So you might dwell on a lost love, or you might dwell on a mistake that you've made, you might dwell on something that you feel guilty about. It's usually not very healthy. If you frown on something, you disapprove of something. So you might say, her parents frown on her new boyfriend, meaning, you know, they're not happy, they disapprove of him, they frown on her choice. Okay, if you happen upon something, you stumble upon something, you come across something completely by accident. So very similar to come across here, it's when something appears completely by accident. Hello to Brazil. If somebody eggs you on, then they try to influence you in a negative way. Usually this is at school. The kids will egg on one of their friends to do something naughty. Maybe they'll egg him on to steal something from the sweet shop, or from the cafeteria, from the canteen, I should say, from the school canteen. And all of his friends egg him on. Or maybe they egg him on to start a fight with someone, but it's always negative. And it's very similar for this reason to put someone up to something. His friends put him up to it. He might get caught by the teacher, and the teacher might start telling him off. And he might say, no, it wasn't me, my friends put me up to it. He's trying to say it's my friend's fault and it's not my fault because they influenced me. They told me to do it. They egged me on. Hello to India. Okay, on to these ones, 15 and 16. If something juts out, then it comes far out from the main body. Usually you're talking about a building and you might say that the balcony juts out, meaning it comes out of the building. On this particular wooden building, there are two sides which jut out, and I banged my head on one of them as I was coming round from a box which is on the left hand side. I wanted to get a tool, I wanted to get an axe out of the box, and as I walked round I went straight into the piece of wood which was jutting out, so I must be careful not to do that again. And I actually cut it shorter anyway than it was supposed to be so that this wouldn't happen, but obviously not short enough. It still juts out and it can still cause damage. Maybe not to shorter people, but to someone who as tall as me, it certainly juts out a little bit and can hit me. Okay, if you pick something out, it means you have the choice of many different things and you pick one thing out. And so maybe you're watching a TV show, a quiz show. If the presenter picks you out from the audience to play in the competition or in the contest, he takes a choice from a large selection of people. But you could also pick something out of a large selection of objects. So it's when you choose, but from a large selection. If you spread out, I mean literally this means this, you can spread out your arms to embrace somebody. But you could also spread out your things all over the table. Maybe you get to school, you've got all your bags in your school bag, you fish them out and you spread them out all over the desk. Yeah, you fish them out your bag and spread them out all over the desk. If you throw someone out of your house or kick someone out of your house, you're not happy with them, you're annoyed with them, they've behaved badly, they've behaved awfully, and you decide to kick them out. So this could happen as well at university. If you don't do any of your essays, they might kick you out. At school, the teacher might throw you out of the classroom if you keep talking to the person next to you, something like that, if you keep going on about something to the person next to you. If you go to a casino, if you're very unlucky, the casino might clean you out. So when something cleans you out, it leaves you with no money at all and no possessions. If you have a burglary and they clean you out, they take everything, absolutely everything that's of any value, and they clean you out. But you might even go to the supermarket and spend lots of money and say, the supermarket has cleaned me out, the shopping has cleaned me out. So this one means leave you with no money at all. If you drop out of university, it means that you find it too difficult or demanding, or it's not for you, and you decide to leave and just go and perhaps join the world of workers, and perhaps that's a good thing. Okay, if you lash out at someone, it means you suddenly attack them. Kids often lash out if they get offended. They suddenly start attacking someone. And so this one's very similar to hit out at, but hit out at could be used metaphorically, but so could lash out. You could say the Prime Minister has lashed out at her critics, meaning she has attacked her critics. She's defended herself. She's stood up for herself and lashed out at her critics. So lash out, like hit out at, can be metaphorical or realistic, in which case it would be violent. If a meeting drags, if the boss drags out the meeting for 5 hours, or he draws it out for 5 hours, it means he makes it very long, much longer than it should be, and it becomes tedious. So please remember that we say the meeting dragged on for 5 hours, drag on, the meeting dragged on, or the boss dragged the meeting out. That's the way we use those two phrasal verbs. If you wrap up the lesson with a quiz, then you round off the lesson with a quiz. I would say wind up is a little different actually, because wind up is end up. It's not quite wrap up. You wrap up the lesson with a quiz, you round off the lesson with a quiz, but you might say wind up is exactly the same as end up. So you might say a distant relative of mine died, and in the end I wound up with, see it very often with, Wind up with, end up with. I wound up with a few £100. And you might say I ended up with a few £100, yeah? And it means you were left with. Okay, prop up. When I was making this building, I had to prop up the roof. Or I had to prop up a board while I put the insulation on another part of, under another part of board, or I had to prop up the insulation while I put the board up and screwed the board into place. So prop up means hold something up. I propped the insulation up with a long piece of wood, and that did the job for me. But prop up just means hold something up with an object or with your hand. You could prop something up with your hand as well. And this one can be used metaphorically as well. You might say that the economy is being propped up by very low interest rates, something like that. And you can certainly say the same thing with shore up. You can say the economy has been shored up by low interest rates. Shore up means prop up as well, very, very similar. If you do up your flat, you maybe do the walls, you do the floors, you do the ceilings, you paint, you put wallpaper up, you put new floor down, you do up the flat, you jazz up the flat. So they're both pretty similar. I mentioned them last time. Land up, finish up, end up, wind up are all the same. And so you might say, you know, I gave the example of a will, a last will and testament, but I could have used land up or finish up for that example. I could have said I landed up with a few £100 or finished up with a few £100. It's exactly the same. So land up is another good way of saying end up. If you buy up, then usually you say buy up all the shares or buy up all the company, because buy up means buy completely, 100%. So buy up, yeah, completely. The up is being used in the sense of completely, as it often is. If you show up late or turn up late for class, it means you come late. So this one just means arrive, or it can mean appear as well. Nobody showed up at my party. Nobody appeared at my party. Okay, if time passes by or slips by, it often means goes by unnoticed. You could also use it for people and say, he passed me by in the street, but I didn't notice him. Or you could say, that piece of information slipped by me. Let me check that one. I'm not completely sure. But yeah, I think I've done these two on my phrasal verbs with by, so you could check that video as well. But we certainly say that time passes by, or people can pass by as well. Slip away is down here, and if you slip away from a meeting, you leave it unnoticed. You leave the meeting without anybody noticing you. Now you can fritter away time, or you can fritter away energy, which basically means waste. Waste time. You can fritter away the hours on a Sunday afternoon just lying in bed or watching TV. You can idle away a few hours on a computer game. So this really does refer to wasting time. Get on could mean get on a bus, get on, get off for public transport, get in, get out for cars. But it could mean somebody's getting older if you say he's getting on a bit. And it could mean that the day is getting later and later and later. It's becoming night if you say it's getting on a bit, I need to go home. So it could mean get older, it could mean get later, or it could mean just get off the bus, get on the bus. Okay, stem from and be rooted in is about causes. It's like come down to and boil down to. So I gave you the example of the police and the lack of the problem of violence in the capital stems from a lack of police. Account for means explain, be able to explain something. And so you might say something like the fact that his mother had a birthday on that day might account for his absence, yeah, might explain his absence. So very common one. They're quite formal, not very informal. If something rebounds on you, it has a negative effect on you. It's a negative reaction. And so you perhaps achieve something, but then it has some kind of negative consequences that rebound on you. And so this could quite often happen with some kind of new government policy. Some kind of new policy can rebound on the government because of unforeseen circumstances. They suddenly come back to haunt you. Now, point 2 is usually means indicate. So you might say that the recent hot summers that we've been having point to a change in the climate, or you might say it points to a change in the sun, or something like that. But indicates, point 2 means indicates. Add up can mean make sense without to. None of this adds up. It means none of this makes sense. But add up to means lead to or result in. And so you might say something like, the lack of policemen on the streets in the capital adds up to a huge increase in crime. Yep, leads to, results in a huge increase in crime. Okay, on to the last ones. Whew, been a long day today. If you stick to your principles or keep to your principles, it means you don't let go of your principles, you stay with them. You are a principled person. Remember the phrase, stick to your guns. It's like dig your heels in. Okay, it's like don't change your mind. Okay, if you tinker with something, it means you try and make small changes to it in order to improve it or fix it or repair it, patch it up maybe. So perhaps your remote control stops working and you decide to tinker with it and try and get it working again. But it could be anything. It's very often used with electrical items, tinker with, but it could be with any kind of mechanical item that's very often broken and you need to tinker with it to get it working again, or maybe to adjust the settings. You could tinker with something to adjust the settings. If somebody tampers with your luggage, there's something clandestine again about tampering with an object. If you tamper with an object, you're often sabotaging the object in some ways. And in the customs, again, when you go through customs, the customs officer might say, has anyone tampered with your luggage? Meaning, has anyone touched it or been doing something strange to it? He wants to know if somebody has put some drugs in there or some guns in there, and they have to ask before they open so that they can say in court, well, we asked him if he had packed his luggage himself. He said nobody had touched his luggage, nobody had tampered with his luggage, and yet he still had the clandestine goods inside. Okay, if somebody perks you up, or if the sunshine perks you up, it cheers you up. If your local restaurant has turned into a gym, it means it's been changed from a restaurant into a gym. Easy ones, really. Now, if the smell of, if the smell of paint summons up memories from your childhood, or calls up memories, or stirs up memories, or conjures up memories, it means that it brings back memories, that the memories come flooding back to you. Now, this is all slightly different from a flashback, because a flashback is quick and unexpected, and it just takes you back to a moment in your life that you have already experienced, and something might happen which suddenly gives you a flashback of when you were 14 and something else happened. Could be something like deja vu, where you think, I've already seen this, and it brings back memories. You flash back to that old experience. But it's also used in films, where those kind of weird films where you've got one timeline and then you have a flashback to much earlier in the person's life. So it's also used like that. If you block out memories, that means that the memories are painful and you try to block them out. You don't want to remember them. You don't want to experience those painful memories anymore. So very often people block out painful experiences from childhood, according to psychologists anyway. Now, if you put something behind you, it means that you are able to let something go. It's quite positive to put things behind you, usually, because it means that some kind of painful experience, instead of blocking it out and repressing it, you put it behind you and you can leave it behind now and carry on with your life. You can grow up without focusing and dwelling on that past moment. So these are very often related, these phrasal verbs. Now, if something eats away at your free time, it means it takes up your free time, but something could eat away at your soul as well. And so eat away at means take up or erode. Erode is perhaps a better word for it. And chip away at, it means erode. I think this one's more neutral, not really positive, chip away at, and eat away at is very often negative. And the same with eat into, it's quite often negative. So you might say that the kids are eating into your free time or into your savings. Okay, that's a very long lesson. I'm going to hold it there. Please leave a like if you've enjoyed this video. Concerning camera quality and things like that, if anybody wants to buy me a new camera, just send me an email, I'll give you my address, and with pleasure buy me a nice new camera for lessons. Otherwise, I'm just going to remove any comments about cameras, lights, microphones. They're not interesting for me. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.